All right, we got that done. All right. And Wayne is on as WM as well. Okay, perfect. So this is a special board meeting. It was called for the sole purposes of the recreation cost sharing, and this was at the request, and somebody's asking to join. I'll admit and then find out who it is. All right, who's on 7837 phone? Just need to be able to see who all is here. Who just joined on number 7837?
Joyce, did we lose this, or did that just me?
Lose what?
Well, it just all went away and come back again. Is that just me, or is that everyone?
I think it might have been just
Wade,
two.
No, Wade Greenlaw is on too.
Wade's on the phone. Okay, I'm just going to rename you so we can
Okay.
see who you are, Wade. Perfect. All right, so we've got 4 in the boardroom, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We've definitely got quorum, so we're ready to go. Thank you all for your patience with these difficulties and some latecomers to the meeting, including myself. So we'll call the meeting to order, and to formalize it, we have to have an adoption of the agenda, I believe, just in the one item on the agenda. So I'll be looking for a motion to adopt.
I'll move.
Terry?
Yeah.
All right, so do we have a seconded? Second for the agenda, which is the single item. Heather Hatt raised her hand. Perfect. Any questions about the topic? All in favor of adopting the agenda for this one single item? I'll go pull the board. We'll start with the boardroom. Annette?
Aye.
Dennis?
Yeah.
Winston?
Aye.
Jim?
Yes.
Perfect. Then we'll go to the screens. Doug?
Yes.
Sam? Sam? You're muted. Yeah, you can just wave your hand. We can see you. Thank you.
Both. Yes.
Thanks, Sam. Heather?
2 votes here.
Yes.
Thank you. Dick Isabel?
Yes.
Terry James?
Yes.
Thank you. Ken?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Thanks. Wayne McQuarrie?
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. And Wade Greenlaw?
Yeah, I'm good.
Faith Avery?
Yes.
Perfect. We're all in agreement on the topic of tonight's meeting. It's the only thing on the agenda, so we're ready to go. And we'll launch right into it. And once again, this request came out of the RRCOC, the Regional Collaborative Oversight Committee. And Mayor James is the chair of that committee. So it's good to see her on tonight.
Yes, I apologize for the sunglasses. I had cataract surgery and it's a little bright in here.
No apologies necessary. We're just glad you could be here and that the surgery went well. That's awesome.
Yeah,
excellent.
great.
Good to see you. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to you, Terry, and then you can introduce Sherry or defer to Hollis, whatever you want to do, okay, where you're the chair of the committee.
Sure. This came about as I realized that there was confusion on the RCO committee with regard to the cost sharing plan and its rollout. It's changed in that it's the perspective. I don't want to get into it because I want to leave that for Sherry, but the perspective has changed from solely an Eastern Charlotte regional cost sharing strategy to fully regional recreation cost sharing strategy. And I think therein between the two was the source of confusion. So in order that everybody understands and on the same page, I've asked for this special meeting so that everyone gets the same information and so we can make an informed decision. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the recreation implementer, Sherry Stewart, And thank you for coming tonight, Sherry. I'll turn it over to you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Absolutely. Yes,
I'm
Hollis, go
first
ahead.
on the agenda.
Yep.
Okay,
Pardon me?
are we good to go?
Oh, yes, I think I finished polling everybody, did I not? Or did I stop at Terry? I got everybody.
I think I got it.
Yep. No, I was just pointing out that I was going to give a little bit of a brief history on the first part, so the first part of the agenda, and then we're going to turn it over to Sherry, if that's
Perfect,
okay.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
yeah.
my apologies, Hollis. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so I'm going to be brief here, but I just wanted to a little roadmap of how we got to this point here tonight on recreation cost sharing. So I'm going to take you back to February 2017. This is before my time. There was a board meeting, and there was 3 presentations at this board meeting. The first one was Greg Evans from Tourism Heritage Culture. He made a presentation on regional recreation planning, and he noted that under the Regional Service Commission system, that the recreation planning and cost sharing was a mandated service as per legislation in the province in 2012. There was another presentation same night, Darren Turner, and he made a presentation about the proposed Coastal Link Trail. And the third presentation that night was Scott Boyd, and he made a presentation about potential new recreation facility in the eastern part of the region. That same meeting, it must have been a longer meeting for you folks, but the Recreation Committee was created. So this was in February of 2017. In March of 2017, the board made a motion to create an RFP for an outside consultant to create a regional recreation master plan. In August of 2017, Stantec Trace were awarded the project for creating the recreation master plan for the region. And a separate RFP was created for a study of the Coastal Link Trail project.
Hollis, if I could just interject and refresh the board's memory, these studies were both funded 75% by the province, were they not?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So fast forward to April 2018, and the Stantec Recreation Master Plan was complete and was adopted by the board. From that document, Policy 4-2, the Commission and its members shall adopt or develop a framework of districts encompassing all areas of the Southwest New Brunswick region that reflect communities of interest within which access to recreation facilities and programs is commonly shared. And then the other policy that's pertinent to tonight is the Commission and its members in consultation with the province of New Brunswick shall work to develop equitable methods of cost sharing for recreation services within districts defined pursuant to policy 4.2. So if we go ahead to October 2018, we hired a recreation plan implementer to carry out what was in the master plan. And this position was also partially funded by the provincial government. And the reason for that was because we had created the master plan. The goals of this position were all tied to that plan and included assisting the Coastal Link Trail with developing the trail. The RC was tasked with dispensing the associated government grant that came for them. To investigate and facilitate ongoing feasibility and gap analysis of recreation in the eastern part of the region. And to further develop the possible framework for recreation cost sharing of the whole region. In November, an RFP was put out to do a feasibility study of the Eastern Region Facility Project. That's different than the cost sharing we're talking about. In February of 2019, Dillon was awarded the project for the feasibility study. It had a narrow mandate, and it was to study the needs in Eastern Charlotte, St. George Blacks Harbor area, and to look at the business plan that had already been produced by the other group for the proposed facility in that area. So in June of 2019, that study was completed and presented to the board. One of the recommendations that came out of that was to create a sub-regional recreation facilities board. That's the SURF board you've probably heard in various reports over the past couple of years, to do further studies on the needs of the Eastern Charlotte County, and that happened after that. At the same time that this was happening, a possible internal plan was starting to be developed for region-wide cost sharing. Concerns have been expressed about plebiscites possibly derailing the project, but we began investigation using the already available tool we have, which is the cooperative regional planning budget. This is something we already do and we have been doing since inception. So June of 2020, staff worked on developing region-wide policies that would be equitable for everyone. We developed several different versions, and some of them evolved. In June of 2020, preliminary versions were reported on and submitted to the Regional Collaborative Oversight Committee. In August, the final report from the SURF board was given, but that report also references region-wide cost sharing. So that's the reason that I put that into what I'm talking about here, is to show you that there was relevance between what happened in the Eastern Charlotte study towards the entire region cost sharing. It all came out of the master plan. And on August 13th, we had a committee of the whole meeting, and that was held to present the region-wide cost sharing, which is again what we're talking about tonight. At the stage it was at the time in August. In September, a draft of the regional recreation cost sharing was presented to RCO committee, along with a proposed timeline. The intent of this policy is that it becomes Recreation Master Plan 2.0, so it's an addendum to the currently adopted plan. Since that time, since the fall, there's been lots of one-on-one meetings with municipal staff, municipal representatives, LSD reps, in order to get feedback, to refine the plan, and to clearly communicate the intentions and goals of this new policy that we're talking about. So again, it's important to note that this was a separate thing than the Eastern Charlotte thing, and the Eastern Charlotte thing is not irrelevant at this point. It still stands, it's still valid. This is something that can actually just be a foundation and assist that plan. Now,
Hollis, can I just pause just for a minute and find out who joined on the phone number 1171?
star 6 to
Can I ask whoever joined? Pardon me?
Deputy Mayor Wayne Sturgeon, Graham and Ann.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm just going to rename you.
Very good.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate that.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
All right, keep going, Hollis. Sorry about that.
So I just wanted to share what it is we're going to talk about in a nutshell. This is just a couple of minute thing. Sherry's going to have much more detail than me, but here's the 15-second elevator pitch. So revenue for this plan would be collected through the already existing cooperative regional planning budget that the RSC has. The budget's currently about $110,000. So if we add 2 cents per hundred of assessment to the region, it would yield an additional $515,000 approximately. So it would bring it up to about $625,000. The increase would be distributed back to recreation assets in each zone, and zones are high school catchment areas. And the money stays in the community it comes from. Recreation assets are either major recreation facilities that serve the whole region or the zone, or possibly personnel in the form of recreation directors where no such facility exists, or both. The RSC is responsible for this budget and also ultimately responsible for the oversight of expenditures. So regular reviews will ensure transparency and accountability. And finally, and this is important, this financial input is not intended to 100% finance all recreation. It's just meant as a starting point and a baseline. Further individual requirements of zones can build on this foundation if needed. And that's what we were talking about in Eastern Charlotte. So what came out of their the Dillon report was that they were looking for about 5 cents per 100 to sustain facility. With this in place, they would only need 3. Thank you, Madam Chair. That is my
Introduction. A recap, I guess, would be a good way to put it. Thank you, Hollis, for running us through that. I think that's been very, very helpful, even just for my purposes. So we'll turn it to Sherry and she can present the plan in its entirety.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Hollis, for the history there as well. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, just give me a moment here. Okay, so Hollis has done a fantastic job at giving you all the history and background on how we've come to where we are at today to discuss the recreation cost share policy. So today I'm going to do a hopefully good overview of the basic pillars of the policy. I'm going to go over the zone collections again, which Hollis lightly touched on with respect to the high school catchments. We will talk about the fund distribution rationale behind the policy. We are going to talk about the recreation directors and how they are going to play a really important and integral part in implementing and effectively having this policy be a success. We're going to touch base on the proposed service agreement structures with each zone, the Service Commission, and how these recreation directors that are new would tie into that. I will touch base a little bit on the process improvement audits that also form up this policy. And lastly, lightly touch on the services that the Service Commission will be providing through this policy. So as he alluded, the foundational document that this policy forms is the Recreation Master Plan. And if you haven't had an opportunity to read through it in great depth, essentially there are 4 key areas that were identified that needed to be improved in our region to improve recreation planning. And those are improve existing programming and or lack thereof programming. There were facilities that were identified, major recreation facilities identified that needed some financial support. There were existing facilities that needed to be modified to essentially fit the aging population that exists right now. So that is in terms of accessibility. And in my opinion, one of the key important factors here is the human component to affect all of these components. So in a nutshell, the 3 main pillars of this policy is the financial component, which Hollis has already lightly touched on, the people component, and then the progress and improvement component. And I'll go into greater detail on that. So we all, I feel, have a very good understanding of how and why the zones were determined. In a nutshell, schools and recreation programs and facilities all serve the same community members. So the high school catchment area already established made sense. Now, within that policy that was sent out last week, there was a map. And the map is good for people who are visual. But what I have done is I've put those zones into a table form so everybody can have a good understanding of how dynamic and different all of our zones are. There are some zones that have up to 7 or 8 LSDs, a couple of municipalities. There are some where there's essentially going to be contributing only to one municipality, or there's going to be some where, you know, it's a little bit less. So it is different and dynamic. And the reason this is important is to help you sort of understand some of the language that I'm going to be moving forward in when I'm talking about the policy structure and those 4 main components. So as Hollis alluded to before, very simply, 2 cents is collected per $100 of assessed property value per zone. And this is where we see all of the LSDs and municipalities working together, contributing to the recreation services within their own zone. He already touched base on this is something where this policy can be the mechanism to collect those funds by increasing the existing CRP budget. And from that, the Service Commission would act as the administrator to distribute those funds or allocate them back into the zones that they serve to affect recreation planning in that zone. And finally, those funds would either go towards a major recreation facility or facilities, the operation and maintenance of those facilities. If there isn't one, maybe it's a recreation director, or perhaps it's both. And then the last 2 items on this slide here for the policy structure, points 3 and 4, are important because this is where not only are we going to see funds going towards, but we're going to be able to track and measure progress and move plans forward. So now I want to go through the decision of how these funds are collected. It is not something where it's going to be at the Service Commission's discretion. There is a rationale behind it. It essentially starts with the first question: are there multiple recreation facilities? If the answer is yes, they automatically have funds go towards the facilities and they have funds go towards a recreation director. Because remember, if there's multiple recreation facilities and multiple communities within that zone, they're going to need someone to essentially affect recreation planning in that community. If the answer is no to does this zone have multiple recreation facilities, the next question is, does it at least have one? If the answer is no, then it automatically defaults to 100% of the funds going towards a recreation director position, new or existing. If the answer is yes to they have an existing facility, the next question is there an existing recreation director doing tasks for all communities in that zone? If the answer is yes, then those funds collected from the LSDs and the municipality will be distributed back into the facility of that zone. And if the answer is no, a percentage of the funds go towards a recreation director, because we've identified that as an important component of making this policy a success, as well as a percentage of the funds towards a facility. So to help illustrate these different variables or decision points when assessing or reviewing this with respect to your own personal zone, I'm going to walk through 3 scenarios here for you. So example 1 would be this zone has multiple facilities and they are also in need of a new recreation professional. So this sees the municipalities working collaboratively and contributing roughly $50,000 towards recreation services in their region. And then the 7 LSDs are contributing a total of $104,000 for a total of $155,000 for that zone. Now, the Service Commission is the mechanism in which they're going to assist in collecting all of those funds, and then they're going to cut a check for recreation facility number 1, cut a check for recreation facility number 2, and cut a check for recreation for the recreation director, which I'll go into greater detail on how that all works when we talk under the mutual service agreements. So then on to the next example. This zone has an existing facility and they have an existing recreation director. Here we see the LSDs contributing to the major facility within that zone. And the third example, there's no facility and it already has a recreation director doing services. The municipality is already investing into this person, but now they have the opportunity with the LSD helping to support that. And this is where they would see those funds go towards the recreation person. Now, I apologize, I haven't listed all 7 communities on this overview, just it became really hard to read. It probably already is very hard to read for some of you. But again, this just goes to show, or I'm trying to illustrate here, just the various different types of mutual service agreements that are going to be created to affect this policy with the Service Commission. It's not going to be a one, you know, the same one's not going to work for everybody. So this is just a good example of helping everybody understand that what is happening in one zone may not necessarily be representative of what could happen in your zone. So we're going to move into the recreation director. So I've mentioned a couple of times now that this person or people that are already in place play a very important role in our path to progress and improvement for recreation planning and services in our region, and essentially moving forward and the recreation master plan. What's going to change for some, because for some it's already happening, is that we would like to see the recreation director be responsible for municipal and LSD recreation. And with this, they're going to move the whole zone's initiatives and goals forward, but still try to align where possible the region's recreation master plan goals. And again, as mentioned, it's going to be very important on a very large territory or where there's a diverse demographic being represented, that they have a point person that can represent the needs of all community members and not just select areas. And they are going to be the people that are going to act as the boots on the ground affecting the work. So last week and the week before, I had an opportunity to consult and review the proposed policy with all of the CAOs, as well as some of the other municipalities, to get feedback on what we were putting forth and to ensure that what we're suggesting works for the municipalities. And we had some great conversation. And what we've heard is that in some instances where there is already a recreation director in person and affecting that work already, it's not intended for us to go in and change any structure that's happening right now, with the exception of now we would like it that the LSDs now have a say or input into the recreation planning and services through the mutual service contract that will be established within each zone. And this is something that the Service Commission would assist with setting up and administering. And in that, this is where we see the work plan and the yearly objectives of that zone being defined. And so this is an opportunity for the LSDs and the municipalities to collaboratively shape up how to improve recreation in their zone. But we do understand that it's important that this person stays autonomous and can be really close and reactive to council and the decision makers within their community. And so I think we will likely model what's already happening in some of the other communities like McAdam, St. Stephen, where the recreation director is just going to report into the CAO for the day-to-day needs, and they're going to carry forward the zone's needs and objectives. And then there's going to be a very soft line to the Service Commission for new and existing recreation directors of information and data sharing, as well as ensuring that not only is the recreation director going to move forward the zone's needs, they're going to help ensure that they're staying aligned and everybody's rowing towards the same goal of the recreation master plan. And so talking about what is this person going to do? In a nutshell, the obvious of program and special event planning. They're going to be able to assist with overseeing staff for coordination, or perhaps it's getting volunteers involved for some of those special event programs. But they're also going to be a good tool and resource for municipalities when they're preparing their budgets, and a good opportunity for, or a good resource for certain LSDs where maybe they need some improvements to other existing facilities, but they're not considered a major facility. This person can be the person applying for grants to make those improvements. They're also going to have some slight facility oversight of existing facilities. And I'll touch base on that in the next slide, as well as really focus on marketing promotion of recreation within the zone. And finally, some administration. And with those roles and responsibilities, what's going to happen is, and as it will be defined within the mutual service contract, is that these recreation directors are going to help do regular facility and program gap analysis. It might already be happening in some, so this is going to be for the new ones that are coming in. But again, they're going to be assessing, are we offering all the programs that meet the needs of the community? How are, or is there a way for us to maximize rentals or venue capacity? How can we best use the facilities that we have now? They're going to be able to really put in some energy and efforts into the planning, implementation, and managing of recreation services in their zones, which will hopefully alleviate pressure and time on the existing volunteers and staff who are doing these tasks right now if they don't have a recreation professional. And it is the intent and the hopes that we'll be able to maximize community involvement through all of these roles and responsibilities. And with that, I'm going to roll into the data and information. And so this is something that Hollis alluded to at the very beginning of his presentation. I've mentioned a couple of times now too, why the data and the information. So the Service Commission will collect data for the annual summit. It's going to happen every year, and they're going to perform a gap analysis. And so this is going to be reviewing all of the programming that is happening within that zone. We are going to be doing age analysis, just like sort of the full meal deal, similar to what the Eastern Charlotte project went through with the SURF committee. Through that, they will facilitate the annual summit, and from there, I am calling it a zone scorecard is going to be created. So each zone will have their scorecard. And from this scorecard, action items are going to be delivered from it. And these action items are going to be what's going to drive the progress forward towards the master plan goals and affect recreation planning in that zone. And so this process improvement scorecard, first and foremost, as I mentioned, will be organized and facilitated by the Service Commission, done every year. And the goal is to align current and future programs, services, and the facilities with our goals. It's not a financial audit. And The way we have it envisioned right now is that each zone is going to be attending this audit. And from each zone, there's going to be the zone director. There's going to be LSD rep or reps. And, you know, in some instances, there may be, if possible, it would be wonderful to have every representative from every LSD at this summit. Might not be realistic, but that would be the goal. There's going to be municipal representatives as well. That's something that can be worked out at that time, as well as some qualified recreation person from the zone. So this is somebody who's maybe from a sports organization within your communities, or just someone qualified to really provide that, be that subject matter expert on recreation as a point person. And through that, I envision it being a 1 to 2 day workshop where each zone's going through and they're going to be self-assessing all of these key pillars of recreation within their zone. Everything from active living, inclusion and access, connecting people, marketing awareness, and obviously recreation capacity. And so this will be interesting and possibly insightful, because it's going to involve many different interested parties, and there's going to be many different viewpoints. But this is where I think the ideal, this is where we can ensure that the LSDs have a voice and sound at the services that they are going to be contributing towards. And it's going to have an opportunity for all of the zones to have a baseline made. Where are they currently sitting? And from there, they can build action items. So all of the individuals from that zone are going to work collaboratively through this 1 to 2 day summit, figure out the zone's immediate action plan items. And so this is where it's going to be identifying possibly certain facilities need a little more attention. It could be better awareness, it can make it more inclusion. And from that, so they're going to establish at the summit these action items. Zone director is going to take that back to the individuals that oversee the mutual service agreement. They're going to review them together. They're going to see if that makes sense. And then from there, agree or decide what moves forward and what doesn't move forward on the next year. The recreation director then is going to set some objectives and goals, and they're going to work towards that over the following year. And this is where tracking of what's happening, peak times at facilities or program participation, all of that data can start being collected. And some facilities are already doing a fantastic job at doing that. So it's probably going to be very easy. And in some areas, there might be a little bit of an opportunity to make some room for improvement. But at that, they're going to work through that for the full year, again, reporting back into the CAO and that overarching committee that has the mutual service contract. And then again, full cycle, do it all over again at the annual summit. So from there, the questions have been asked is, what kind of support or how is the Service Commission involved and what services are we going to be offering here? And first and foremost, it's regional recreation planning is first and foremost what the Service Commission will be offering. The second item would be administration, and as we had mentioned before, that's as simple as acting as that vehicle for the fund collection, distributing it back out, establishing the service agreements, ensuring that the policy is being met and that all of these key pillars are being hit that's set out within those mutual service agreements. And then last but not least would be the data analysis and the trend insights. This is something that the Service Commission would take on in compiling and ensuring that we can make progress. So with that said, today, given everything that essentially touches base on everything with respect to the policy in a nutshell, I wouldn't say that the policy is finalized 100%, and I think there's still opportunity for improvement or changes to suit the needs. But we are hoping to have the adoption of this policy in place by Q1, so in the new year. From there, the executive director would propose a budget increase to the RSC. It would go through another review at the Service Commission level. And then again, the RCO would review the proposed budget in August and then vote in on it in October. And after it would be voted in, the policy would be in effect. So last two slides here is if this is successful and is something that we could implement, there is a bonus add-in from the province that would provide zones that currently do not have recreation professionals. This grant is 5 years. It would cover up to 75% of the person's salary, or $45,000, and then decrease by $3,000 every year for 5 years. And this would be nice because that surplus that would be recognized rather than the funds being collected in, as I had mentioned before, about $55,000, which is the suggested base salary or recommended for that type of person. That $45,000 can now go back into and be redistributed back into the facilities of that zone that it serves. And as I had mentioned before, there's another option here for recreation coordinators. So for those zones who already have recreation directors, but maybe they might need some support to include oversight to the LSDs and some of the other programs that's happening in the entire zone. The province is also offering a 5-year grant, but that would see $35,000 or $37,000 and then decreasing over time. So again, same thing, that extra surplus or those funds could be then reallocated back into a major facility if needed. And if that's not possible, you could work out something different, because I think there's some other instances in different zones that it could be applied to. So that is that in a nutshell. And that is all I have right now. So I'd like to open the floor to questions.
Perfect. So if we can stop screen sharing there just for a moment, so I can so I can see everybody's faces when people want to ask a question. Perfect. All right. So per a standard board meeting, the first questions that will be allowed will be from the board. There was no motion expected at this meeting. After the board has asked questions, we will allow the public to ask questions. There has been one question come in already, so that's awesome to see some public engagement tonight. Are there any questions from any board members about this presentation? Doug?
Joyce? Doug?
Yes.
Just two quick things. One, just for clarification, I understand this, but just might be good for all of us to understand. If this goes the way it's been outlined today, and again, there's lots left to do on this, we understand that, this won't be in place until 2022 budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay, good. My next question is with the last slide, that Sherry went through, we happen to be one of those sub areas, one of those zones that does not have a recreation director. Would it be safe to assume that working through the Regional Service Commission, that we could commence that sooner rather than later, as opposed to otherwise we're sitting for a whole year waiting to get a recreation director?
Yeah.
So will the cost share apply if we decided to go forward in January 2021 with money we already have in place for a recreation director, and actually go ahead and get our $45,000 bonus payment for 2021 and work on the agreements along with that? That's just my, doesn't have to be answered now, but that will be something we'll bring forward certainly from St. Andrews.
Something that we can,
yeah.
something
So
that we can research.
Yeah, exactly. So that's essentially my question.
Well,
No
it's a
doubt.
great question. I have already looked into that scenario and spoken with my colleagues at the province. And if the adoption of this policy is accepted and put in place by the board, and we do enter into these mutual service contract agreements, with the exception of the fund collection, because that's not possible, they would be comfortable with working out a situation in zones that are seeking to implement a recreation director immediately.
So in that case, where it's 75 up to 75% contributed, 75% contributed by the province of the base salary, and I know from previous projects that works out to about 50% of the total cost, because there are payroll costs associated with having an employee. So if that were the case, and it's a cost sharing thing, I'm assuming the 50% for the 25% of the base salary plus all the payroll costs would be absorbed by whichever communities are taking advantage of that, because it's certainly not in the RSC budget for 2021. So we couldn't really expect any portion of the cost sharing to come out of that 2021 budget. Is that how that would work?
That's the way I would see it, Joyce. I would see it that if we wanted to get ahead of that, our question is, we have a vacancy. We have a vacant position that we want to turn into a recreation director, but we don't want to sit with a vacant position for 12 months waiting for everything to get put in place for the whole region. But as long as we're connected and say, we like the way this is going, we'll jump in when we can. But in the meantime, we'll just get to where they are in some other communities where they already have a recreation director. We just want to get there sooner, that's all. And I think we can still start working on the agreement with the LSDs and involve them as soon as we get a recreation director. In fact, I'm anticipating they would even be involved in the recruitment of a recreation director if we went ahead with the anticipation that by the end of the year, we'll have this agreement as we've talked about today. So
perfect. Yeah, and Terry has her hand up, so we'll allow Terry to ask her question, make her comment.
I have a question, and I might have missed it, but so I'm understanding we're going to have recreation directors, that's fine. So I'm understanding that one is allocated for Eastern Charlotte, according to the documents. But what I'm wondering is for Western Charlotte, there's already, I believe, that position in St. Stephen, am I right? You already have a recreation director, and Mayor Naish is saying they want one. So are they gonna have two recreation directors in Western Charlotte? How does that look for funding? Like, how does that work?
Great question. So according to the school catchments, the St. Andrews LSD areas are different than those defined in the St. Stephen zone. So yes, they're completely different zones. They're not the same in this policy.
Okay. Any other questions from any other board members? And if you're on the phone, speak up because I can't see your hand, of course. Or if you're in the boardroom, certainly I can't see the hands raised in the boardroom either because it's just a tiny, tiny bar on my screen. So if there's any other questions, Wade has a question. Wade Greenlaw.
Yeah, just so what we're doing here is we're going to be basically, this isn't going to be anything that the constituents or the people in the LSDs or the municipalities are going to vote on. It's basically, we're going to adopt it in our budget, and by raising the rate that we're going to charge for regional planning, right? So this is
correct.
Yeah. So basically, we're going to make the decision whether we implement it or not. I just want to make sure that was the
In speaking to that, Wade, I did mention it to the I believe it was the executive committee when we met, that when we rolled out the recycling program across the region, we did do public consultation quite right across the region, and so it's certainly, and it certainly wouldn't be something that I would discourage, is having those consultations and explaining what exactly it means. It's not that we don't think LSDs are paying their fair share or anything like that if we're making this proposal. So I do think having conversations would be something that I would certainly support as a person who lives in an LSD. So, and we did do that with the recycling program as well. So, and I know there was extensive consultation done specific to Eastern Charlotte. So, but you're right, the decision will eventually come directly to the board, whether we choose to hopefully hold consultation or not. So,
well, that's what I mean. If there's consultation, it should be consultation about what's going to happen. If the board, adopts it, it isn't about whether it's going to be, that we're going to get feedback and we're going to, let the public make the decision on it. It's going to be something that the board's going to handle.
Yes. Did you have your hand up, sir?
Well, I just wanted to comment on some of the same comments that you had. The LSDs are not really, I know we're represented on the board, but me, for instance, I'm at large, so I'm not representing, there isn't anything that I can take back to Bocabec or to Bayside or Shamcook or whatever. So they're not really involved in this process right now. So I would agree that some public consultations would be in order before the decisions are made. And that should be something that is sponsored by the commission, not sponsored by individual LSD chairs. We don't have the means to do that, or the people to put those presentations on. So it should be something that's sponsored by the Service Commission to have public consultations before we make any decisions on implementing the policy, and especially on budgets and so on. We keep seeing in this document about collection of money and so on, but for it's tax collection is what it is. It's a raise in tax, so we have to tell the people that. And there was something else in the presentation there about LSDs derailing things. We've never derailed anything here in the LSD that I represent, because we've never had anything presented to us for a vote. So we don't like those words that we're derailing something. Have some public consultations with the people, and in the end, the board will make the decision, and that's fine if that's the mandate the government has given. But I'd like to see some of those terms taken out or changed. We're not out to derail anybody here at least in the LSD that I represent. So I think we need a little more consultation there, and a little more clarity. I just wanted to point out in Hollis's presentation, the Eastern Charlotte original proposal was for 6 cents and not 5. It was 2 cents to cost share, 2 cents for a director, and 2 cents if they wanted another facility. I think Hollis mentioned they would only be looking for 3 now, so maybe just some clarification on that, Hollis. I'm pretty sure it was 6 cents that they were proposing from the Eastern Charlotte committee or SURF, whatever it was. So I wasn't involved in the 2018 master plan. I wasn't on the board then, so I can't comment on that. But you know, it's there's some pretty decent proposals in this, or pretty decent things in this proposal that would certainly benefit the county and lots of those facilities. We just need, we don't want to be in a position where we have people on the LSDs saying that they were not consulted and they have no say and so on. And it's fine to have questions after a public meeting or after we have a public meeting, but to have a meeting and vote on something and then ask the public to ask a question about it after the meeting, that doesn't really make any sense to me. So they need consultation first. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam, for your comments. Wade, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, now's the time that it would probably be, now's the time where it would probably be best to do some kind of a, you know, work on a information campaign, something to make sure that it was, you know, put in the right light and it was spun the right way. This isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. We don't have a lot of choice with the way the economy is and the way the population is here to do this if things are going to survive. So maybe it's, you know, might be some of the resources spent on that.
And I do think it, coming back to that comment, Wade, one thing that was mentioned executive committee when we discussed it too is that one of the huge advantages of doing it through the RSC is we know that the province is certainly talking about changes province-wide to the Municipalities Act and the Regional Service Commission Act. And if we take the initiative ourselves and we collect from within the region and keep everything in the zone it was collected from, the citizens are actually, whether LSD or municipal, are going to have much more say and much more influence in how that money is spent than if the province just imposed a province-wide levy or a tax increase and then just dispersed it wherever the pet project happened to be for the province at that time. So I think it does give the residents of the region much more influence into how their contributions are spent and allocated. So I think that's one very positive thing that we could make known to the residents of the region. Are there any other questions from any of the board members?
I have one, Joyce.
Dennis?
I'd just like to make a comment on the 5-year commitment from the government, or the 5-year, don't matter which one you take, whether it's the 45,000 or the 32,500. If I'm not mistaken, I think there is an expectation after the end of that 5 years that you commit to 5 years of keeping on that rec director besides that at your own expense.
Okay. That's an important point to note. Thank you, Hollis. I think, sorry, Hollis's name is on the screen, but it's Dennis talking. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate your comment. Are there any other questions?
Sherry could probably address that now because she's already been talking with Greg Evans and that on this.
Sherry, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so the expectation would be that this position continues to stay in force and that you don't take advantage of the opportunity being presented by the province and then do part with the person, right?
Okay. Any other questions? Dick, did you have your hand up? No, okay. I have a question, something that wasn't clear to me, Sherry, and maybe if it is, and I just missed the boat, please forgive me. But who is the employer of these recreation directors? So if a zone doesn't have a recreation director, I know the town of St. Stephen does, currently the town of St. Andrews doesn't. So the St. Andrews zone doesn't have a recreation director. Right. So if there's another zone that also doesn't have a recreation director and doesn't move forward with hiring somebody right now, somebody has to cut the check for those recreation directors. Who are they an employee of? And if they are an employee of the municipality, do they then fall under any municipal union that would prevent them from working on something outside of the town scope or outside of town limits? Who would be the employer of these recreation directors?
So the employer would be the CAOs or the towns, for example, in St. Andrews. And to be honest, I don't think much thought has been put into the unions. But if we were to look at an example, for example, Alex Henderson with the Planning Service Commission, he's more or less contracted. So perhaps there's opportunity there where contracted to the town and they report directly to them. Those logistics that we would have to sort out on the individual mutual service contract agreements that are created.
Right, but I do think that's a logistic that I would certainly feel would have to be settled first, who they are an employee of, and would there be any constraints in that? Because you referenced Alex Henderson, but he's an employee of the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission.
Yeah.
And so the contract that each town or the LSD has to get their services from the planning office is certainly a much different thing. In that case, the Alex is an employee of the SNBSC, just like as much as you are. Tanya Harrington was your predecessor, for whom you're filling in. So it's a much different scenario than having an employee of the town cutting the paycheck for a recreation director for a zone. And how would that be affected by any union constraints if they're an employee of the town? So I do think that's an important question to have settled, because we may have to look at a different approach if there would be some constraints that way. Alan, did you have a question?
Yeah, our recreation director is in management side of things. He's not in the union.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good information. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate
Madam
that.
Chair, if I could.
Yes, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what Sherry was saying was more that while I am an employee of the Service Commission, I basically work on behalf of municipalities through contracts. So I think if you go back into Sherry's presentation, you'll see that each rec director position is managed through a contract, like a mutual contract with the commission and that municipality or the municipalities, because in Eastern Charlotte there's two. So I think in some way it's going to have to be up to that contract negotiation about how it works for each zone, how that rec director is overseen. But I think that the philosophy that Sherry talked about is the idea. It's a little bit different than my position. I think you're correct, Madam Chair. Whereas I'm an employee of the commission, I think in this case, these rec directors were talking strictly as employees of a municipality or a group of municipality through a contract. But there is a connection back to the commission to make sure we're working on the same goals and that they're serving the LSDs around them in the zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. Clear enough. It was just a question that popped into my head, not knowing how it worked, and I didn't see it addressed. So that's what the board is for, is to ask questions, right? So thank you to all who give input. Ken, did you have a question?
Alan had his hand up there. Go ahead, Alan.
Sorry.
Well, so now I'm sure we got a lot to work out here. So this is my throw it out here. What if there is an HR issue, and what if the town needs to deal with our rec director during this, after it's 2022, and like, can the town just take care of it, or how's that going to play out? Or is my rec director now an employee, or same as Alex Henderson is my employee contracted to the RSC? Not really sure how that would play out.
I don't know.
Yeah, so we've had conversations about that, and regarding terms of dismissal and job performance. And I think, again, because there's that mutual service contract, and again, this still needs to be ironed out, but it would be, if there's a new recreation person in place and perhaps they're not working out, they're not meeting the needs, they're not fulfilling their job responsibility, I think there would have to be approval or essentially consensus from all parties represented within that service contract to agree to let go of that person, for example. In instances where there's already recreation professionals in place, as I had kind of mentioned before, we don't really see that changing much.
Make another comment, please.
Madam Chair, if I may, we already have a kind of an example of this sort of thing, and it's in Sherry herself, because we get funding from the province for Sherry's position, and the province has a say in her work plan. So we're kind of already doing this at that level now. So
Right.
if we had a big problem with Sherry and I had to fire her or discipline her or something like that, there are certain basic HR issues because we're her employer that we would take care of. However, if it was fairly major to the point where it came to a point of dismissal, along the way, there's always going to be consultation back to the province. So I would be consulting back with the province. Sorry, Sherry, to throw you in the spotlight here. Not that I have an issue with you. I'm just saying, we had that example.
I think though, Hollis, I think that from my, oh, sorry, you were cutting out. My apologies. Wasn't trying to overtalk you.
Oh, that's good.
My apologies. There was a bit of a delay there. I didn't realize you were still talking. I certainly apologize. That wasn't my intent to talk over top of you. I think that's different though than who is this. In this case, again, her position is funded for sure, partly through as part of the recreation master plan implementation. That's true, but she is still an employee of the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. That's who cuts the paycheck. So my question was, who cuts the paycheck for these recreation directors? Is it a municipality? Is it, if it's a shared director, maybe where there's no municipality that has a director and it's a person who cuts that paycheck, and that entity would be the one for making the case. The one signing the paycheck is the one that makes the case. So that's just my question of who actually, what name is on the top of that check, that it's got to come out of a bank account, whose name is on that bank account.
I think the expectation is that the major municipality of the zone, unless there's some weird reason why not, but the general expectation is, the major municipality of each zone, that would be the employer.
Okay.
They're going to take there.
And so that it would rest on that employer to deal with any HR issues, like Alan said. All right. The other point that I wanted to know, does any other board member have a question? I just have one more point I wanted to, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a few here. We talked about salary for the administration cost for district or service commission. And right now, 75% of that cost is being borne by the province. And that was to run for 5 years.
It was 75% of the base salary. It works out to about 50% of the total cost. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So basically, then based on that, we're into about the 3rd or 4th year. If we agree to this and move forward with it, will all the municipalities then be required to cover a share of that labor cost or that administration cost once the provincial money runs out? That's my first question. I don't need an answer, but it's something that we need to assess later, because it just shows that this program is going to cost us even like more money down the road than just the rec director. Are we planning to build in an opt-out agreement or an opt-out clause? We may get into this and find that the LSDs and the municipalities are not getting along, and perhaps somebody wants to opt out. I just throw that out there as something that should be discussed. We look at hiring rec directors for our organizations. We already have one in McAdam. I know St. Andrews is looking for one. St. Stephen has one. Is the provincial funding dependent upon the rec directors having specific qualifications? Or can we, for example, our rec director doesn't have any qualifications. other than an active mind and a lot of energy to put forward. Perfect person for the job. But by going along with this, do we affect people's employability? In essence, in the effect of trying to get the provincial funding. So those are three of the questions that I wanted to just throw out there. I know there's a lot of discussion to take place over this coming year, but those are three things I thought should be addressed.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for those comments and questions for us to be looking forward to as well, Ken. The one other note that I wanted to make from my perspective is that when that regional recreation master plan came to the board table, there were some, I don't like to use the word deficiencies, but it if I remember correctly, we as a board, we made the motion to accept it as complete. We did not, with the understanding that it was a guiding document and that we can use what we found that was complete and beneficial and anything that we felt was deficient or didn't quite meet the needs. So it's a guiding document for the board. And I certainly, if someone's reading through that recreation master plan, I certainly, that was my recollection of it. We adopted it as complete to finalize the contract that we put out for the recreation master plan, but it did have, if I remember correctly, and I think Terry could speak to this some more, some deficiencies. So when we adopted it as a board, we adopted it as complete for the purposes of what we had asked them to do, but certainly not as, you know, that everything in it was going to be exactly as the board was going to find was the best case for us. Alan, you had your hand up?
My question would be, because you get in this program or this thing that we're setting up, is the municipality is also putting in their 2 cents, right? My question is, when my 2 cents paying out is more than the 2 cents coming in, because it go back to what Mayor Stanek was saying, like, why would I even want to be part of that, right? Because I can come to that because I am growing, or we are growing, sorry, and I'm very aggressive in that mode right now, I guess, if you want to say it. And I can bring in something really large in a municipality that's a huge tax increase, and then that could take away that little bit of money that I'm getting. So that concerns me. If I grow, which we are growing, and I'm starting to see the growth now, it's been a few years getting there. So I want to know how that plays out. Does that make sense?
In your case, in St. Stephen's case, you would never spend out more. You would always get more back because all of the contribution in your zone goes into Garstown. So
okay,
all of the money that you would put in comes back, plus all of the LSD money.
Correct. You're right. My apologies. That's right. I see what you're saying now. Okay. I got you. Thanks, Hollis.
Yeah, Joyce.
Yeah. Winston.
I have a question.
Yes.
We're something like Ken standing there in McCann. We don't really have the population or the amount of recreation that would require a recreation director, professional or whatever. So the 2 cents that we're getting under this, the Manor Sutton and the Village of Harvey put money in already into the rec center. Now, is this going to cut the 2 cents down? Because as I say, if we don't hire anybody or if we don't hire a professional, we're going to be, you know, someone may be part-time, $25,000, $30,000 a year. Is that going to take the 2 cents, or is that, you know, how is it going to work? Because if it's not professional, then the government's not going to get it. So, and as I say, we're getting money now from Manor Sutton, or we aren't, but the rec center is, and they're getting money from the municipality. So does that You know, how does that cut us out in what we're doing now?
Sherry, do you have an answer specific to that zone?
So I believe right now we currently have Manor Sutton represented as the funds going towards the existing facilities that are supporting recreation. That's how we see that working.
So it would be an additional 2 cents on top of what Manor Sutton is already contributing?
No, so I think, so I had a good opportunity this week to really explain this in detail to the CAOs of some of the towns. And so we're not suggesting that you add an addition, but perhaps this is an opportunity to just, if you're already collecting it from one area, rather than collecting it from that area, just collect it from this area. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, we aren't suggesting an increase per se.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, then sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. I apologize. I started talking when you were again, Sherry. I'm sorry. There's just a tiny lag there. I apologize. Keep going. Sorry.
Right. So, because I think that was unclear for some as well. They were suggesting that, again, this was an addition to what municipalities are already doing. And we are suggesting that perhaps they just revisit how they're currently budgeting and collecting for certain line items. And rather than collecting it from one line item, perhaps they collect it from another, just in addition, so that at the end of the day, municipalities are receiving support from the LSDs towards recreation programming where it makes sense. I hope that answers that.
Okay, so in the case of Manor Sutton, instead of it going directly to Harvey, it would that contribution would stop and it would come into the RSC along with the other, and flow from the RSC back to Harvey.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well,
And Kathy
actually, it doesn't go to Harvey, Joyce. It
Okay.
goes to the Recreation Committee, and they have
Okay.
the Harvey Recreation Committee does it, and they don't have any professionals people looking after it, but everybody is mainly volunteer staff, and maybe a little paid contract work for doing certain jobs there. But what I'm concerned about is that what Manor Sutton puts towards the rec center and the village puts towards the rec center, is that going to be cut down because we're going to put 2 more cents in something in the rec director, which I don't see in the future that we have a rec director.
I think the intent is if what's working in Harvey Manor Sutton now is working well, we don't want to ruin it. We want to change that if that's what's meeting the needs of the community and that's what they want to do. It might be a bit of, I think what Sherry was saying is might just be a bit of a paper exercise, but the end result will be exactly the same if that's what they want.
Okay. And
go ahead, Joyce.
Sorry, I just saw somebody else raise their hand. I thought you were done again, that little bit of a lag. I'm sorry. Kathy had her hand up first, and then I saw Alan and then Sam. So we'll go in order. Winston, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off again. That tiny bit of a lag. I thought you were done. I apologize. Did you have anything else to finish with?
I'm done.
Okay.
No,
Questions that can certainly be addressed in a one-on-one as well to get more clarification and brought back to the board table again. Kathy, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. I sit on the board of the Harvey Community Center in Harvey. So basically when we implemented the 2 cents on our tax base, it was to basically give the rec center money in order to keep a roof over its head and to give it money to pay the bills as they were coming through the door. So when this recreation position or this strategy came about, we wanted to allocate some of that 30,000 towards the rec director, and our district manager told us that it could not be used to pay for wages.
Okay.
So we couldn't have a contract based on what the grant money that we're receiving. But with this strategy that comes through, then we're going to be able to split up that grant money, and they're going to be a larger area to contribute. It's not just going to be LSD of Manasutton and just the municipality of Harvey. There's going to be a larger area because dictated by the school district. So it's going to take into part of like the Prince William LSD. That's my understanding.
All right. Alan,
But
you had your hand up.
I think though that the problem we've been facing is that the LSD of Prince William and some of the other places belong to Fredericton. So it's going to make it difficult to get them on our side because we talked to them before on different subjects and they don't seem to want to come into our area. They want to stay in Fredericton area and put their stuff there. So this is the problem I see anyway.
All right. More discussion for sure. Alan, you had a question next.
So what I can see happening here, like I know this is way early into this, but why isn't it a recreation director that St. Andrews or St. Stephen have not able to help out that zone, even though it's a different zone? They're already scheduling stuff. They're already like, why can't they help another zone?
I wouldn't say that they couldn't. I think the expectation would be that there's shared resources and support. So I think if both zones were supportive of further collaborating together on a human resource front, I wouldn't see that being a challenge.
I mean, that is the whole benefit, I think, of what we're doing here today is if you got someone that's already organizing sports and recreation and in the fields and ice surfaces and all that in one zone, it's, you know, you're only adding whatever the facilities are in some of these smaller zones. I think it would benefit them. Yeah. You know, they're already in, and they're also involved with the province on what's going on and all the regulations and all that stuff that can be very good resource for all of us. Anyway, just a thought.
That would be the goal and would be wonderful to see, not gonna lie. Yeah.
Okay. Sam, you had your hand up.
Okay, two comments. One on the question that from Harvey. It might be good to look at Mayor Stanix's comment about being able to opt out. So that may work for somebody like that. If there was an opt out clause in there, that they could just simply say we're being adequately funded now and we don't wish to participate in this. So that's one thing. The second thing on this issue of who these rec directors are working for, that still seems to be very unclear. So I would suggest two options. They either work for a major municipality and the major municipality has a contract with the Service Commission to contract those services out to the other communities, and that way the employees is the responsibility of that municipality, including union or whatever it is, and then their services are contracted out, so that if there's not performing, then it would be handled through the contract and not through HR. The second option would be that rec director be employed by the Service Commission and contracted out to the municipalities. It would just be in reverse. So you have to have one of those two options. You can't have a shared, let's everybody get along rec director. It has to be clear on who the employer is. Thanks.
I appreciate the insight, Sam. Great suggestions, and something we can work through when we work in, as we sort of progress over the next few months and refining everything.
Because that's basically what we're doing now with planning, and the employees are employees of the commission. They're contracted to the municipalities. They review and renew their contracts at certain time intervals, and either continue to contract it or, amend the contract in some cases. So as long as it's clear, I don't think anybody would have any issues, but if it's not clear, it could turn into quite a thing.
Certainly. Mhm.
If they are employees of a municipality and they're currently, maybe they have a contract or a work expectations, I guess, a work description, that would have to be amended, of course, if they're working outside of anything to do in the town limits, if they're current employees. So,
Yeah.
so again, perhaps there is, and I know there have been other discussions about hiring someone that all the municipalities could share. And that was not in terms of recreation directors, but that was in terms of other professional services that towns need on occasion. So maybe that is something to further discuss. But if a policy is looking for a motion in the Q1, that's not very far away. And so having all of these questions brought to the board and having some more discussion and work done is definitely something we need to don't be afraid to ask those questions and make those comments and get the answers you want, because if we move ahead and adopt a policy, we're committing ourselves and committing staff to working on something, and we want to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed long before we do that, and we fully understand how it would. Because the last thing you'd want to do is go through an exercise like this, maybe host some public consultations, adopt a policy, go through all that, and then not have it pass in the budget because we have unanswered questions.
Yeah.
So ask the questions. If you can't think of one tonight, you think of one later, send it off via email to the board, CC everyone, and keep the discussion going. May I ask who's on the phone number 76297?
It's Wayne.
Wayne again?
I got disconnected somehow and I had to dial back in.
Thanks, Wayne. I thought it was you. I thought I recognized the number, and then I got second guessing myself. So I appreciate you taking the time to answer that. Thanks.
I get the same old question. How are you going to force anybody to do this? Like, you got LaPro on there for about $20,000 into this. That's going to be their share, roughly. How are you going to force them? They don't even come down here, anywhere. They all go to St. John, every one of them. And even half of Penfield goes to St. John for that matter, I think. So how are you going to, I don't know.
How it would work,
I keep getting the same one on me. How are they going to do this when we don't even use it?
Legitimate question. Legitimate question. If it's done, it would be done through the cooperative and regional planning budget, just like the recycling program was, where it's put in under that silo. And because it increases the RSC budget, that silo is affected by the property taxes of the citizens based on population and property value. And so that's how it, I don't like to use the word force, but that's how they would be opted into it. But your question about why they'd be opting into something in a region they don't use, that's a legitimate question that you have as the LSD chair. Absolutely.
Because a lot of them are going to put up a fuss. They're already yakking about it now. And then, like you say, this ain't going to go into effect for another 2 years, till 2022. But they're already squawking to me, well, why are we paying for this when we don't even use it?
Yeah, we've got about
don't talk to me, talk to them. I'm just passing the information on.
We got about 13 months to implementation if it gets implemented. So a lot of work to do if it moves forward and lots of questions. So certainly, yes, Alan.
I guess.
So I'm going to use Penfield as an example because
Alan?
it's great out there. You hear me?
I can now.
Yeah. I'm going to use Penfield as an example, or LaPro. If they're using services in St. John, shouldn't their money go to St. John then, right?
Well, that's a question I think that Wayne is asking, absolutely. But if we base it on high school catchment areas of the member communities for this RSC, they would fall into this RSC's model.
Right.
So maybe the boundaries of the RSC aren't accurately reflecting real life experience of the residents. I don't know, but that's the boundaries we were given by the province when the RSCs were formed. So that's the challenge we find ourselves in. It's legitimate to ask, Alan, for sure.
No, I can see the situation there, but it's just they got to decide where it goes. If they want to support recreation in St. John, then so be it, and then move forward, I guess.
Yeah. Lots of
I have a
questions.
question there.
Keep them coming. Dennis?
When you was going through the list there, it was, everything was gonna go, and it was gonna come to the board, present it to the board, then come back to the board, and then it was gonna go to the RCO. Why wouldn't it go to the RCO first, then the RCO report to the board?
It
You're
was
talking
a
about what?
suggested timeline, but I think at that time that was how it was suggested. Hollis is really the one that prepares the budgets and may be able to speak to that a little bit more in depth with the rationale, because he's the one going to be essentially affecting the budget preparation for this line item.
I'm gonna jump in.
I think there might have been a miscommunication there. The committee that I consult on the budget with in August is actually Finance and Audit. So I think maybe that's where that would have, should have been directed to. So, you know, as we present to the board and people seem to want to go forward with it, then when we prepare the budget, then we meet with Finance and Audit Committee a couple of times throughout the summer before, you know, it's presented to the board. So I think maybe that's the committee that should have been in there.
Yeah, but it still should have been before it comes to the board,
Okay.
right? What it had, it was going through the board. I didn't write them all right down, but it was back in the thing. And it was to everything, then the RCO was the last one on the list for it to
Yeah,
get through.
that probably should have been Finance and Audit.
And that should, Finance and Audit should have it before it goes to the board. Or the final things back in, when it comes up in August.
Yeah, it's not set in stone. It's,
No.
you know, consulting with Finance and Audit and the board on the budget item. This particular one where it's a major change in direction on the budget, you know, the board needs to have good, full understanding of it before.
Alan had his hand up again, so we'll go to Alan.
It was pretty much answered. This was just a large item. That's why we wanted to have this discussion that we're having right now. It involves everyone, and the RCO meeting, we even said that we can't make a decision like that and bring it to it without getting everyone's input. That's my opinion on that. This is a large item for sure. It needs all input.
Definitely. And committees are assigned their work by the board, as you all know, from long experience working on councils or on this board. And so the committees get their work assigned by the board and then report back to the board. So definitely that is the structure. Dennis is correct in saying that. And then it gets, so lots of questions. Are there any more from the board members?
One more thought.
Yes, Ken.
Doug and I and Al, I won't put words in their mouths, but we've discussed this earlier as to not on this specific item, but on other items as to why the commission doesn't pay on behalf of all the members. And the answer we get back is because in general terms, not all the members are involved in a specific item. But in this case, if we all join in on this and we all agree to this way of moving forward, then all the players are in place so that perhaps we can revisit that discussion that on Sherry's position, it could be paid by the Service Commission rather than by the communities.
And I think Sam alluded to that as well, that maybe we need to relook at how that position is paid so that there are no constraints as far as municipal contracts or work expectations, or but then you look at communities who have one and you certainly don't, does this become an addendum to that and they keep their recreation director and all the costs go contributed just to the facility for those communities who have one. So lots and lots and lots of discussion yet. Sam, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, just one comment on it. The nice part about Mayor Stanis's comment was, if there is a dispute, it can be dealt with through the contract and not the employee. That's the important part of that. So whoever is the employer has a contract with whoever isn't. Okay, so if it's the town of St. Stephen, they're going to have a contract with the Service Commission to provide that recreation director's services to the outlying communities. Then anything is dealt with through the terms of the contract and not
Right.
the employee. And it can work either way. It can be an employee of the commission or of the municipality. And that, to me, is the only way to do it. Then you're dealing with your terms of your contract, not with your employee.
Excellent point. Thank you. Alan?
Yes, I totally agree with what Sam's saying, and Ken. It is very important because there could be a huge cost to whoever's holding the contract for an employee. I've been through a few, and
Yeah.
who absorbs that? They could be way, way more than what we're talking about here for recreation, for example. So I think that's very important to who holds that contract, and who's obligated to hold the contract, and all that has to be figured out for sure. I think we're heading in the right direction, but I still think we got to iron this out because, as Sam alluded to, it could be a very big issue, especially when it comes down to when there is an issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Any other questions from the board members? Any questions from board members? I'm scanning the screens here. No further questions from board members? Okay. Well, that concludes the discussion portion of our single item agenda. So we'll move at this point to questions from the public. I have one in front of me, and from Linda. So Linda's question was this: good evening. How do the LSDs have actual input and participation in decisions in the zones? It looks like the municipalities are the decision makers on a day-to-day basis. Thanks, Linda. Now, I'm not able to communicate with her in real time and have her on here, so I'm not sure if her question has been answered because this popped in a little bit earlier. But Sherry, if you could just reiterate how the input works for the member communities who happen to be LSD communities, and how that happens through the accountability structure or the annual meeting that you were talking about, or however else may answer her question.
Yeah, no problem, Madam Chair. So there's two functions here. There's the one with the annual summit where an LSD representative from each zone would be in attendance, and they would have input to assess, review, and make suggestions towards improvements. And again, through the mutual service contract that's established between the Service Commission and all members of that zone. And if you recall back to talking about the employment reporting structure and who that rec director is, annually, there would be the expectation that the LSDs have input on this person's work plan, this person's objectives and goals and areas of focus for recreation within that zone.
All right, so that made me have a question. It triggered something in my mind. I'm just taking notes here on my notepad too as I type, not paying attention. So the LSD members who come to this annual summit, is it one LSD member from each LSD in that zone?
It would be wonderful if, for example, if there are 7 LSDs in that zone, that a representative from each LSD is at that summit. It would be great. And
Okay.
they would all be welcome.
So who decides who that LSD representative is? Is it the chair of that LSD advisory committee if there is one formed? And if there isn't, like, who decides? What if there's 3 people from an LSD who wants to attend that summit, all from maybe one LSD? Who decides who that is that would go represent that LSD?
I think that's something that we could certainly work out within the terms of the mutual service contract agreement. But I think right now I would envision it as something where the chair of that LSD would be the person to provide insight and recommendations on who attends, who would be the best person to attend on behalf of the LSD at that summit.
All right, and another question that I had, there was also a recreational professional who was going to be invited to attend that summit. And again, my question would be, who decides who that that professional is that should represent the zone. If it's a hockey coach, would they be kind of biased? If it's someone who's very involved in the trails, would they be kind of biased? Like how is that decision made about who represents the people in the zone at that summit? And Alan, sorry.
Sorry,
If
Sherry.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll let
I was
Sherry
just going
answer
to
my question
interject and
first.
answer it really quick, if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah,
Mary.
go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
Okay. So again, I think this is something that the Service Commission would use at their discretion to ensure that it's fair and unbiased representation of a recreation professional in that zone. And so I would expect that it would be good practice for the Service Commission to consult with all members of the members of that mutual service agreement to inform them of who is being suggested and work together collaboratively to ensure that there's the right person at the table, or people. It could be multiple, but it would be a collective collaboration.
Could I make a suggestion?
I'll go back to
Madam
Alan, and
Chair?
then Sam has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Joyce.
Yeah,
so
I'll get you, Sam, soon as Alan.
Yep.
So just a comment and then just to kind of let everyone know how this is all laid out now. Recreation, you're going to all find that there is so many recreation people out in our county that are doing this already. They actually lead this now. I'm willing to bet most of the people who are running our rec center right now in St. Stephen do not live in town now. They control what goes on in that facility and on all our fields and ball fields, all that sort of thing. So they're going to be the same players. There's only so many of them, and they're the ones that got their heart and soul in sports. They're going to be bringing in the ideas, bringing in what the need of the community is. That they're out there and they're not going anywhere. And they're not all, like I said, they're not all from
for sure.
municipalities. Guaranteed, I would almost guarantee that most of them are outside. But I just want Linda, who made the message, and all the board know that this is already a community run recreation facility in all municipalities. I can't speak for McAdam, St. Andrews, and Harvey, but I'm sure that the same people are there. They're doing the same thing in their areas.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Sam, you had your hand up.
I thank you for your comments, Alan. That made a lot of sense. I would just make a suggestion that if the seats were limited, or it was 7 LSD members were too many for the committee, that you might try what PrAC does for their members. They put out an advertisement in the paper for people that are interested on sitting on the board to apply. And then I think the commission makes the decision. Is that the way PrAC members are appointed from the LSDs?
Yeah,
Pretty much, yep.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
That could work. So once every 4 years or 3
I'm
years?
not on PrAC, so Hollis can, I know the member communities who get their services.
Yeah. But in the LSDs, I know that an advertisement is put in the paper, the local papers, asking people that if they're interested to apply to sit on the PrAC. And then the names are submitted to or reviewed by the commission, and somebody is picked.
So it could be the same thing. People who are interested in attending the summit as a representative can put their names forward to represent on the summit. But there's just a bit of a delay. If I'm over talking anybody again, I apologize. My screen's going all wonky on me.
Yeah,
I am certainly not trying to be rude.
No, that was my point. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
just one way to do it.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. And one thing that I am kind of one thing that I am hearing come out of this is that one thing is certain, if we do this, the board has to understand that it's taking on a large workload as board members. And there's a lot of oversight involved. There's a lot of consultation. There's a lot of decisions to be made and a lot more budget considerations. So there's certainly, this board is, has not been shy to take on ambitious projects. And this is probably going to be the single most ambitious project we've taken on to date. But I know you're all up for the challenge, but it's quite obvious that it is going to increase the workload that we are taking on for ourselves. And I think that's a testament alone to the dedication that each of you have to the communities and that you serve and to the region that you serve as a collective. So kudos to you, because it's big, it's ambitious, and you're showing that you're up for the task. So it's really good to talk to you all about it. Are there any other questions or comments? Terry, did you have your hand up? And then Alan again. Terry?
I haven't heard it. I might have missed it, but I was just wondering if Sherry would go over how this regional cost sharing plan impacts our island communities.
It would serve as a function. I don't think it would necessarily impact our island communities per se. I think it would just be a mechanism or a vehicle put in place to, again, if you noticed, Campobello is essentially on their own right now. So the funds and everything, this would be a mechanism to improve recreation services in that community. And for the Deer Island, Grand Manan areas, would see Grand Manan,
Whitehead Island.
Yes, Whitehead Island, yes. So those two, they would receive a little bit of extra support for their existing recreation facility there.
So assuming that the 2 cents would be collected off islanders as well. So in the case of Grand Manan, for example, where they do have a recreational facility, if they're collecting the 2 cents, wouldn't that mean they would have to have a recreation director too, or no?
I think they already have a recreation director in place. So,
and Campobello, it would just, I'm just saying, at Campobello, it would just go so that they could start a recreation effort?
Correct. Yes.
And that would be payable to the municipality.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think we're getting a little off base here. The two islands are both rural municipalities. They have no LSDs, either one of them, because they've already amalgamated into rural municipalities. Therefore, they're really not part of this plan because they have no LSDs in their subzone on which to get the 2 cents contribution towards recreation. So
Well,
they're
they have Whitehead. Whitehead Island.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So anything collected just stays right there on the island.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. So that's why it's a little bit different and than what we are on the mainland. Where
because they are a community unto themselves as far as Campobello goes and Deer Island.
And their municipalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Deer Island is part of Eastern Charlotte.
Of Eastern Charlotte.
That's right. Yes, Fundy Isles.
Fundy Isles, yeah. Any other questions or comments? And I didn't see any others. Nothing more has been emailed to me. I've just checked. Nothing more has been emailed that has come in. So we've had a good, robust discussion. You all received food for thought for tonight. And hopefully it's triggered some more questions that can come back for more discussion. Just be aware of what we're taking on here when we're discussing it. It's definitely going to increase the responsibilities and workload for the board. So any other questions or comments? Nothing. It's good to see you all. Be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I got one. I got one question.
What?
Those things that you guys have been sending through, whoever's been sending it through, those reports or whatever we're supposed to be downloading. That's a different program. I can't download them.
Okay, I'll get.
I downloaded. I get half a page.
I'll get Hollis to reach out to you and see if it can be sent in other format. Perhaps he can convert it to a PDF file and send it to you.
That'd be better, because that one there says Zoom or whatever it says there, and I shrink it down to 20%, and I still get the full page and then half the words.
Okay, maybe we can convert it to PDF and send it off. Thanks, Wayne, for letting us know. We do want you to be able to get it all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was so good.
Okay,
to see
motion
you.
to adjourn.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
everyone.
We'll
Merry
see you all.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
See you next year.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, Alan.
See you next year, maybe.
Yeah, you better.